Good morning, everyone. Welcome to information session for the admission to Keio Law School LLM program for global legal practice. My name is Hiroshi Matsuo. I'm Vice Dean of Keio Law School and Director of this LLM program. Keio University was established in 1858 as the first private university in Japan. Keio Law School was launched in 2004 as a part of justice system reform in Japan, and now it has two programs. One is the JD program for students who are preparing for taking Japanese bar examination. And another is the LLM program for global legal practice, for which you may apply. The LLM program started in April 2017 as the first Japanese law school LLM program, in which all the courses are taught in English. So far, more than 200 students from all over the world graduated and working worldwide. Now, in this semester, more than 50 LLM students are studying here, MITA in Tokyo. The students can enjoy exchanging their ideas and thoughts with colleagues from different countries, which have diversified cultures. They can also make communications with Japanese students who are studying in the JD program. This research environment is very important because the central purpose of our program is to foster global legal professions who can find solutions to difficult issues from a broad perspective. So we hope that you will find advantages and uniqueness of our program and apply for the coming admission. Thank you very much again and for your participation, and please enjoy today's session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Matsuo. Next, Professor Monroe Sheridan, who is a member of the LLM Admission Committee, will explain about admission for LLM program. So, Monroe Sheridan Sensei, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us. I know for some of you, it will be quite late in the evening right now. So I will just give a brief overview of the admissions process for the program, and please take a look at the Keio LL.M program website, which provides a very detailed schedule in the application guidebook, as well as significantly more detail about each step of the process and the required documents. So at the basic level, we have two intake periods each year. And those matriculation periods for new students are in April and September. We also have two application periods. Those are typically in May and in October and November, but some documents are due at an earlier time than other documents, which I'll discuss in a little more detail later. But because of that, it's important to take a look at the website to make sure that you understand which documents are due when. We sometimes are asked about the level of difficulty in each matriculation period. And as a general matter, from the admissions perspective, we try to maintain roughly equal standards and make it basically fair so that you're not disadvantaged regardless of whether you apply in our spring or our fall intake period or application period. Okay. As for the key materials that you need for your application, there are two personal statements, one of which is your purposes for applying to the program, the other one of which is your analysis of a legal issue or problem. We require academic transcripts and your certificate of graduation, a resume provided in the format that we prescribe, letters of recommendation. It could be one or two letters of recommendation. Proof of English proficiency. However, it is possible to be exempted from the requirement to provide proof of English proficiency. We do not have a cutoff for any specific English test score. So if you don't qualify for an exemption from the English proficiency requirement, English proficiency proof requirement, you can submit the TOEFL result, in IELTS results, or a TOEIC result. And we Generally speaking, if you have very strong English skills, that's helpful for the program, but there is no minimum requirement. So you don't need to worry about being rejected specifically because you did not meet some specific number on any of those tests. Most of the documents that you will submit to apply can be submitted online. Some originals have to be provided later. So a transcript, for example, can be mailed later after you've submitted a PDF scan. And there may be a few other documents required depending on where you're applying from, for example. So please take a look at the application guidebook, again, which is available on the Keio website, the Keio LL.M program website, which has lots of detail about this. Okay. As I mentioned before, the website also has a detailed schedule for the application process, and it's very important to look at that. And in particular, if you are applying for one, an exemption from the English proficiency requirement, or two, a certification that you are eligible to apply to the LM program, and I'll explain that in a little more detail in a minute. The deadlines for those documents are earlier than the deadlines for the full application. So again, very important to make sure that you check the deadlines for the documents that you are required to submit. Now, with respect to the eligibility for the program, the basic idea is that, first of all, you need to have an undergraduate degree to be eligible to apply for the program. Your undergraduate degree must be in law, or you must have a Juris Doctor degree, a graduate law degree, or you must have equivalent knowledge of an undergraduate degree in law. So if you have work experience in the legal department of a Japanese company for several years, you may have equivalent knowledge, even if you don't have a degree in law. But we don't have any specific rules that you can look at and make a judgment. If you don't satisfy the requirements to have a degree, say an undergraduate degree or a Juris Doctor, then we will have to make a case-by-case assessment of your eligibility to apply to the program. We also can't provide advice informally about whether you are likely to be qualified or not. So in this case, what we recommend you do, rather than just applying and running the risk of us saying, I'm sorry, you're not eligible to apply to the program, we recommend that instead you submit an application to certify your eligibility. And we have a process for that, and the process takes place prior to the regular application period. It's a much simpler process than submitting your whole application. So, and you don't have to pay the application fee as well. So you don't have to pay money to go through the process, and you won't have to spend as much time to ensure that you are eligible to apply. So we recommend that you go through that process. The same thing is true of for English proficiency. If you are not a native English speaker and you don't have an English proficiency test, then you have to apply for an exemption from the test requirement. And most of the people who apply for the exemption are granted the exemption because most of them have the necessary experience in English. But the deadline for applications for the exemption from the English test requirement, is also prior to the application process, as I mentioned before. And so it's important to confirm that the specific deadline from the website. And the deadline is going to be different depending on whether you apply in our spring application period or the fall application period. Okay, I know that was a lot of information. It was very, I briefly touched on a lot of topics that are covered in much more detail in the application guidebook. But we'll have time to take some questions typically after the rest of the speakers have introduced the other topics on which they're talking. So hopefully if there are any major points that I failed to cover that you really want to know about, we'll be able to cover that in the Q&A portion. Somebody just has a question. We will answer that during the Q&A portion of the discussion because I don't want to cut too much into everybody else's time. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Sheldon. So next, Professor Litt, who is the head of LLM Academic Affairs Committee, will explain about the curriculum for LLM program. So, Litt Sensei, please go ahead.
Sure. The LLM is titled LLM in Global Legal Practice. We don't have, if you go to Melbourne or, some jurisdictions, you can get a very specific LLM in tax law or in international development or something like that. The way the Japanese education ministry and justice ministry regulate the law schools, it's not practical for us to have a bunch of different degrees. We would need to have different faculty dedicated to each one of those programs. It's a fairly general title for the degree, and you'll see we have a pretty broad choice within the curriculum of different areas. We've got a lot of business law. Probably that's the largest single area of all different types. In international dispute resolution is an area where we've really tried to build up our program um, and include lots of the sort of leading practitioners in Tokyo in different areas of international dispute resolution are coming in and teaching adjunct, as well as our faculty. Um, Japanese law, of course, the law school has hundreds of JD students who are studying Japanese law, and the vast bulk of the faculty are specialists, experts on Japanese law who've made their career teaching it or are, in many cases, are admitted to the bar as practitioners in Japanese law. So we have lots of, Japanese law offerings. We have intellectual property. We've had since the outset of the program, an intellectual property expert on the faculty. She has hit the mandatory retirement from Keio, although I think she's still teaching some adjunct, and we have a new Aso Sensei, a new professor in intellectual property who is starting from this month with the beginning of the Japanese academic year, who's, I think, coming from Kyushu University, if I remember correctly. Well-known, younger intellectual property expert. Other areas, we have a number of courses focused on law and development in Asia. Many of our students, probably more than half of our students are coming from other parts of East and Southeast and South Asia. And we also have people such as Matsuo Sensei on the faculty who are specialists focused in that area. So we've tried to build up a curriculum in that area. And then a couple other areas, not the business law tends to be private international law when it is international in nature. And we also have a significant number of public international law classes, law of international organizations, history of international law. We have had classes on space law. And I don't know if we're going to be able to continue that because our space law expert has also recently retired, and we're bringing in a new international law expert, Professor Ogudi, who's also joined us this month. We have a number of comparative law classes that cover, comparative constitutional law, comparative corporate law. I teach a class called American Law and Society that's has some comparative nature in it. And then we also have a lot of practical training classes across all of the practice-related areas. We have, contract drafting class, moot court, negotiation, mediation, arbitration, all of these are very much practice focused. And I'm sure there are others that I'm missing, but That's when the law schools were set up in Japan, Japan already had law as an undergraduate topic, but it was taught traditionally, at least the first couple of years, I think students would have big lecture classes where they'd have several hundred students in a class with an eminent professor who would be lecturing on the aspects of the civil code or criminal procedure, constitution, traditional topics. And maybe the students would send one of their friends to the class to take good notes and then copy the notes and give them to everybody. And then they all show up for the final exam. And so that was sort of the undergraduate lecture style. The law schools have worked very, very hard to avoid that type of class. All classes are interactive. We have generally small classes. A typical class has between 5 and 25 students in it. And at that, and so they are heavily discussion oriented. Some of them are Socratic method, and many of them have a practical training element where people are role playing or doing something like that. So that's the type of program we have. And it's very important. People who are in the program are expected to attend class, to participate in class, and prepare for class. And a lot of the benefit of the program you get is from being in classes with many other students of different backgrounds. It's great to teach a comparative constitution class when there's students from 8 or 10 different countries that have very different government structures, political economic stages, and you can have a much more interesting discussion around a topic like the role of religion in the legal structure, if you have that diversity of students. And so that's one of the strengths, but you only get that strength if people are in the classroom and actively participating. Let's see, because we only have one degree, and we have so many different areas in our curriculum, um, maybe around 5 years ago, we decided to set up a certificate system where you can, if you want to specialize in an area, you can get a dean certificate so that you'll get the LLM in global legal practice, but a certificate in a particular area. And that is helpful to students, hopefully, if they're really coming here to study, focus their studies on a particular area, and they want to hold themselves out to future employers and others as having focused on an area. The certificates that we currently have are business law, international dispute resolution, Japanese law, intellectual property, and law and development in Asia. Those are the five. And we've, it's always possible we would add another one, but I think based on our current curriculum, we want to make sure that it's easy for students to take enough courses to get the certificate, if we're offering the certificate. And to get the certificate, all of them require at least 10 of your 30 credits to be in courses that are in the general area. Every year the admin team circulates a list of here are how many credits this class, maybe it's a Japanese law class and also a business law class. Do you get credits in one or the other? Do you get full credit in both or either? You can look at a list and see that to make sure you're getting, but you need at least 10 of your 30 credits in the area. You also need to write a research paper. We don't generally have a thesis requirement, which is, I think, typical for LLM programs, at least in the US, England, that you don't have a master's thesis requirement. But if you want to get the certificate, you have to do a 2-credit research paper that's a substantial piece of independent research. The other requirement is that in some of the areas. I think in business and international dispute resolution, there is also a specific practical training requirement. If you're getting the certificate in business, you should take, the negotiation class or the drafting international agreements class. If you're getting the international dispute resolution certificate, you want to take, the mediation class or the moot court class, or, the practical training classes that are most relevant to international dispute resolution. I think at this point, a little bit more than a third of our students, maybe 40%, typically try to get a certificate, if I remember correctly. Less than half. There's plenty of people who decide they don't want to write the research paper, and they have other classes they want to take specifically because they like the subject or the instructor, or not trying to line up their classes to make sure they get their certificate. I think I'm done. I think that's all I have to say about the curriculum. I'm delighted to try to answer questions that people have. Thank you.